It was 9 degrees outside in Chicago, and my living room floor felt like a slab of solid ice. My furnace had died 3 days ago. I sat there in the dark, shivering under a heavy wool blanket, my breath fogging the air. The only light in the room came from my phone screen. A live stream of a grand ballroom at a Gold Coast hotel played in my freezing hands. Chandeliers sparkled over tables set for a $1,000 a plate engagement gala. My father stood at the center microphone, raising a crystal glass of champagne. His voice boomed through my cheap phone speaker, declaring my younger sister the absolute heart and soul of our family. He praised her brilliant vision. He praised her hard-earned success as a luxury influencer. He conveniently forgot to mention the $20,000 deposit I secretly wired to that venue 6 months ago to make the night possible. The crowd erupted into applause. My sister beamed, blowing kisses to the camera, soaking up the absolute worship. I swallowed the thick knot in my throat and waited for just a whisper of my name. The music swelled. The mention never came. The silence in my freezing house pressed against my ears. And a cold, sharp burn settled deep into my chest. For 3 years, I paused my entire existence to keep them afloat. I canceled my own modest wedding. I drove a 10-year-old sedan with a failing transmission. Every month, without fail. I transferred $6,000 into an account called the Bennett Medical Trust. My mother stood on my porch 3 years ago, tears streaming down her face, claiming my father was dying of heart failure and they were facing bankruptcy. She swore the medical bills were drowning them. I believed her. I worked grueling 60-hour weeks as a senior escrow officer, surviving on instant coffee and anxiety, bleeding myself dry to save his life. But gratitude was never part of the arrangement. Whenever my mother stopped by to collect the paperwork for the transfers, she made a point to inspect my life. She would run a manicured finger over my cheap secondhand sofa, sighing heavily. She constantly compared my drab, boring lifestyle to my sister Vanessa's glamorous world. Vanessa was the golden child, always flaunting a new designer handbag or posting from a high-rise luxury condo. They demanded my money, but they also demanded my submission. They needed me to feel inferior while I funded their superiority. They broke my spirit then, slowly conditioning me to accept the role of the quiet workhorse. But today, sitting in the freezing dark, the illusion shattered. I was not buying their love. I was paying a tax for simply existing. My thumb hovered over the banking app on my phone. The next $6,000 transfer was queued for midnight. One tap, and the autopay vanished. I deleted the scheduled transfer. Permanently. The next morning, the fallout was instantaneous. My phone vibrated across the kitchen counter, lighting up with a barrage of hostile texts. Not a single message asked if I was okay. Not one asked if I was freezing in my house. They only demanded the money. Vanessa texted me an angry paragraph, accusing me of ruining her wedding aesthetic with my selfish financial drama. My mother left a vicious voicemail, threatening to completely cut me off from the family if the funds were not in the trust by noon. I listened to the venom in their voices with absolute clinical detachment. The sheer entitlement confirmed everything. I was an ATM, and an ATM does not deserve empathy. But I am also a senior escrow officer, and I know how to follow a paper trail. I opened my laptop and bypassed the consumer sites, logging directly into the county property portal. I ran a search on the Bennett Medical Trust. The screen illuminated the lie instantly. The trust never paid a single hospital bill. My father never had heart failure. Instead, The trust was listed as the primary buyer for Vanessa's luxury high-rise condo. They laundered my life savings to buy her a penthouse. The betrayal sat heavy in my stomach. But the investigation was not over. A paranoid instinct kicked in. I ran my own name. I pulled the title history from my small, drafty starter home. The page loaded, and the blood drained entirely from my face. Sitting on the title of my house was a freshly recorded $400,000 home equity line of credit, a massive loan I never applied for, secured against the literal roof over my head. I pulled the digitized PDF of the closing documents. There was my signature, masterfully forged. I scanned the notary and broker seals at the bottom of the page. The broker of record was Derek Sullivan, Vanessa's fiancé. The pieces slammed together into a horrifying, synchronized reality. My parents had my social security number and tax history locked in their home safe. They handed my identity over to Derek. Derek used his brokerage license to push the fraudulent loan through the system. I traced the secondary wire transfers attached to the public filing. Derek did not just fund Vanessa's lavish wedding. His own brokerage was failing. He was drowning in illegal margin calls and debts. He used half the stolen equity to save his own skin. He saw the compliant, boring sister as the perfect, clueless mark. This was no longer toxic family drama. This was a synchronized $400,000 federal felony. The sadness evaporated from my body, replaced by a terrifying, icy resolve. I skipped the local police. I skipped the bureaucracy. I picked up the phone and called the chief title underwriter at Derek's brokerage firm, a woman I had known professionally for a decade. I filed a sworn affidavit of forgery directly with the underwriter. Within an hour, I slapped a lis pendens, a notice of pending litigation, directly on my own property title. That single legal maneuver paralyzed the $400,000 loan. It froze Derek's commission, locked the funds from being sold on the secondary market, and triggered an automatic, unblockable compliance hold across his entire firm. The federal trap was set, quietly ticking down, and my family had absolutely no idea. Friday night arrived. The rehearsal dinner at the Gold Coast Hotel was in full swing. I walked through the gilded doors wearing an immaculate dark suit. I did not make a scene. I did not grab a microphone or project documents onto a wall. I simply took a seat at the bar in the back of the room, sipping sparkling water, watching the wealthy elite of Chicago mingle around my sister and her fraudulent fiancé. Derek stood at the front, raising a glass to make a toast. But before he could speak a single word, the venue manager briskly walked onto the floor, flanked by two men in dark windbreakers, federal agents. The compliance hold I triggered had cascaded. Derek's corporate accounts were frozen, meaning the $30,000 final venue payment he attempted to run that morning had bounced. The underwriter flagged the transaction for federal wire fraud. The agents approached Derek quietly, speaking in low tones that sent a ripple of absolute horror through the room. Derek's face turned the color of ash. He dropped his champagne glass. It shattered against the marble floor. Vanessa shrieked, grasping at his arm as the agents escorted him out of the ballroom, his hands secured in front of him. The whispers of the crowd grew into a deafening roar of scandal. I stood up from the bar, smoothed my jacket, and walked out the front doors into the cool night air. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. She was hysterical, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. She screamed that my father had suffered a massive heart attack from the stress of the rehearsal dinner. She claimed he was dying in the intensive care unit at a downtown hospital. begging to see me one last time to apologize for everything. Empathy, a deeply ingrained habit, flared in my chest. I drove to the hospital, rushing down the sterile white corridors toward the family consultation room. She mentioned I opened the heavy wooden door. My father was not dying. He was sitting perfectly upright in a leather chair, wiping mustard off his face from a deli sandwich. Derek, out on bay, stood next to my mother. Vanessa was pacing the floor. As soon as I stepped inside, Derek moved, a man twice my size. He stepped behind me and shoved the heavy door shut. He crossed his arms, standing directly in front of the handle, physically blocking my exit. The air in the room grew thick and suffocating. My mother stopped crying instantly. Her face hardened into a mask of pure venom. She slammed a stack of legal papers onto the table. She demanded I sign a retroactive authorization form, validating the $400,000 loan. She screamed that I was murdering the family. She threatened to destroy my career, claiming they would tell my employer I was complicit in the fraud. Derek stepped closer, his physical presence designed to terrify me into submission. They boxed me in, using a fake medical emergency to trap me in a room and extort my signature. I looked at the four of them. I did not scream. I did not argue. I simply smiled warmly. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen once. I had been on an active, muted phone call with my real estate attorney since the moment I walked into the hospital lobby. Under the state law regarding extortion and physical intimidation, I had every right to record a crime in progress. I unmuted the speaker. My attorney's voice cut through the dead silence of the consultation room. Crisp and authoritative. He stated clearly that he had documented the entire extortion attempt and that hospital security and local police officers were currently stepping off the elevator. I watched my mother's knees physically buckle. Vanessa let out a strangled gasp. Derek stepped away from the door as if the wood had caught fire. They handed me a felony charge for witness tampering on a silver platter. I opened the door, stepped out into the hallway, and walked away from them forever. The collapse was absolute and merciless. Derek was indicted for wire fraud, forgery, and witness tampering. His firm sued him for the stolen funds, ensuring he would never work in finance again. Because I submitted the Bennett Medical Trust documents directly to the federal whistleblower office, the government seized Vanessa's luxury condo under money laundering statutes. She lost her home, her fiancé, and her entire curated social media existence in the span of 3 weeks. My parents, entirely destitute and facing their own tax evasion charges, were forced to move into a tiny, rundown apartment on the outskirts of the city. The community they tried so hard to impress shunned them completely. The whispers in their social circles turned into loud, undeniable facts. I watched their empire crumble from afar. Sitting in my own home, my furnace was finally repaired. The house was warm. Months have passed since that day in the hospital. Occasionally, a letter from my mother arrives in my mailbox. The envelopes are always filled with the same manipulative poison reminders that she is still my mother, that family is forever, that I need to find it in my heart to forgive them because they only did what they had to do. I do not read them anymore. I drop them unopened into the shredder. There is no anger left in me. There is only the quiet, profound peace of absolute indifference. My life is filled with people who respect me, friends who support me, and colleagues who value my mind. The chaos of my past feels like a distant nightmare belonging to someone else. If you are listening to this and you are exhausted from carrying the weight of people who only value you for what you can provide. I need you to hear me clearly. Narcissistic abusers are not the untouchable giants they pretend to be. They are incredibly fragile. They are parasites, entirely dependent on your compliance, your guilt, and your bank account. The moment you remove your resources, their entire reality collapses. There are 3 rules you must understand if you are ever going to survive a dynamic like this. Rule number 1, blood makes you related, but respect makes you family. Stop paying a daughter tax to people who treat you like an appliance. You owe absolutely nothing to those who use your empathy as a weapon against you. Rule number 2, beware the casino of empathy. Intermittent reinforcement is a psychological trap. Abusers will starve you of affection, only to hand you a single crumb of validation right when you are about to leave. They keep you pulling the lever at the slot machine, draining your life savings, hoping for a jackpot of love that does not exist. The game is rigged. The only way to win is to stop playing. Rule number 3, embrace the peace of the villain. Society will constantly demand that you keep the peace. People will tell you to be the bigger person, to mend the broken fences, to forgive and forget. But true peace is not something you passively find, it is something you aggressively forge. Sometimes forging that peace requires burning a bridge to the ground to stop the enemy from crossing it. If protecting your sanity, your finance, and your future makes you the villain in their narrative, then you must wear that title proudly. Be the villain in their story, so you can finally be the hero in your own. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to lock the door behind you. Drop a black heart in the comments if you have ever been the invisible backbone of a family that did not deserve you. And tell me how you finally cut the cord. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there yelling, how could she let them take $6,000 a month for 3 whole years? Why didn't she cut them off sooner? How did she not see the scam? Let me stop you right there. Courtney was not stupid. She was trapped in a psychological snare called the slot machine effect, formerly known as intermittent reinforcement. When you are dealing with a toxic family, they do not abuse you 100% of the time. If they did, you would walk away immediately. Instead, they starve you of affection. And right when you are exhausted and about to give up, they hand you a tiny crumb of validation. A quick compliment, a fake medical emergency that makes you feel vital, or a fleeting moment of parental pride. They keep you pulling the lever, draining your life savings, hoping for a jackpot of genuine love that simply does not exist. She was not buying their affection, she was paying a ransom for her own peace of mind. But the moment that illusion broke, Courtney executed an absolute masterclass in financial self-defense. Let's break down her smart moves so you can learn how to protect yourself. First, the audit strategy. Scammers, even the ones you share DNA with, rely heavily on your blind trust and your guilt. The moment Courtney stopped reacting emotionally and started clicking into public property records, the entire medical trust lie completely unraveled. Always verify the paperwork. If someone desperately needs your money, they should never be afraid of an audit. Second, the asset freeze. When Courtney discovered the fraudulent $400,000 home equity loan, she did not immediately call her mother to scream and cry. She used her professional leverage to file an affidavit of forgery and slap a notice of pending litigation on her own property. She bypassed the useless family drama and went straight for the financial jugular, freezing the broker's commission. You defeat a parasite by cutting off their funding, not by trying to hurt their feelings. Third, building the case. That hospital scene was a textbook extortion trap. Narcissists will often manufacture a sudden, high-stakes emergency to isolate you and force a panicked signature. But Courtney anticipated the ambush by keeping her attorney on a muted call She legally gathered irrefutable evidence of witness tampering. She let them aggressively dig their own legal grave while she stood there and smiled. Months later, my house was warm again. Not just because the furnace had finally been repaired, but because for the first time in my life, no one was standing at my door with another emergency, another crisis, another bill wrapped in the language of family. The silence that used to feel lonely now felt safe. Peace, I learned, does not always arrive like a grand victory. Sometimes it arrives quietly in a heated living room with your phone turned off, your bank account untouched, and your name finally protected from people who treated it like an asset they could borrow. My mother still writes sometimes. Her letters always begin with guilt and end with blame. She says family should forgive. She says I ruined Vanessa's life. She says Derek only made one mistake. She says my father is humiliated and broken because of me. She says I have become cold. Maybe she is right about one thing. I did become cold. Cold enough to stop handing matches to people who kept burning down my life. Cold enough to stop confusing obedience with love. Cold enough to understand that forgiveness does not require access. And blood does not erase fraud, theft, manipulation, or years of emotional starvation. I do not answer those letters anymore. I do not read them. I feed them straight into the shredder and listen to the machine do what I should have done years ago, turn their words into nothing. Vanessa lost the condo. Derek lost his license, his reputation, and the polished future he thought he could steal from my house. My parents lost the friends they used to impress with money that was never theirs. The same people who clapped for them in chandeliers and champagne now crossed the street to avoid them. Their empire did not collapse because I was cruel. It collapsed because it was built on lies. And lies are weak foundations. But the real ending is not about their punishment. The real ending is that I got my life back. I kept my home. I repaired my furnace. I rebuilt my savings slowly. Honestly, one paycheck at a time. I started sleeping through the night without waking up to check whether another payment had vanished from my account. I stopped flinching every time my phone rang. I stopped apologizing for needing my own money, my own space, my own future. And one evening, while snow pressed softly against the windows, I sat in that same living room where I had once shivered under a blanket watching my family praise my sister with money stolen from me. Only this time, the room was warm. The lights were on. A cup of tea steamed beside me. My phone was face down. And for the first time in years, I did not feel like I was waiting for someone to love me. I felt free. So if you are listening to this while carrying people who only call you when they need something, hear me clearly. You are not responsible for saving adults who keep choosing destruction. You are not selfish for asking where your money goes. You are not heartless for closing an account that was draining your soul. You are not a bad daughter, sister, son, or friend because you finally refuse to fund your own humiliation. Toxic people love to call boundaries betrayal because they benefited from you having none. They will say you changed. Good. Change. Become harder to manipulate. Become harder to guilt. Become impossible to financially exploit. Let them mourn the version of you who stayed silent, paid every bill, swallowed every insult, and still showed up hoping for one crumb of love. That version of you survived for as long as they needed to. Now let the new version live. Blood may explain where you came from, but it does not decide where you stay. Some bridges are not meant to be repaired. Some bridges need to burn completely. Not because you are bitter, but because you finally understand that peace is impossible while your enemies still have a road back into your life. And if protecting your peace makes you the villain in their version of the story, then let them write it that way. Let them whisper. Let them blame you. Let them tell everyone you destroyed the family. You will know the truth. You did not destroy the family. You stopped letting the family destroy you. If this story hit close to home, drop a black heart in the comments. Tell me if you have ever had to financially cut off someone who thought your kindness was an unlimited account. And if you believe peace is worth protecting, subscribe for more stories about quiet strength, cold truth, and the moment the invisible backbone finally walks away. Here is the ultimate verdict. Your empathy is a beautiful human trait, but to a toxic person, it is nothing more than a highly exploitable currency. You are allowed to audit the people you love. You are allowed to legally freeze your assets to protect your future. And most importantly, you are allowed to walk away from people who only treat you like an open wallet. Sharing a last name does not give anyone a free pass to commit federal wire fraud. Have you ever had to financially cut off a toxic friend or family member? How did you finally break the illusion and get out? Tell me your survival story in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button for more real talk on protecting your peace and your assets. And I will see you in the next one.